Logan lay in his bed wide awake. It had been a week since the phone call with his mother. In that week he had gotten to see the face of the Helen his mother talked so fondly of. He studied her when she was on the news doing interviews. He still looked up the rescue on the internet. He still was angry with her. He did not understand why. He just was. Punching his pillow, he rolled over and tried to close his eyes, but all he saw were the blue eyes of Helen. He allowed his mind to go to the interview he had seen the day before. Helen just seemed so uncomfortable, her pale face framed by long blonde hair. A part of him found satisfaction at her discomfort. He did not want to think about why that would be. He knew why he felt that way. His mom was right. There was just something so genuine about her that you could not help but like her. He knew what that was and it made him mad. It was the same anger he got when his mom would say she was praying for him. If he had to be honest. He had more anger at Helen. He had an intense anger he did not understand. With his mom, he got annoyed. He knew she loved him, so he could never get truly angry. With Helen, it just got under his skin. Why? He punched the pillow again and rolled over. It is not like she was different from the girls he grew up with. It never bothered him seeing them. So why did it bother him so much to see it in her? Looking at the clock, Logan decided to give up on sleep and get out of bed. It was 5 a.m. He needed to get up in another hour anyway. Getting out of bed, he made his way to the bathroom. He turned on the shower and then turned to brush his teeth while the water warmed up. Lydia, the little girl, was going to be getting out of the hospital today. He wondered if there was going to be some heartfelt reunion between her and Helen. Cussing under his breath for thinking about Helen again, he disrobed and jumped into the shower, letting the water run over him, in hopes it would wipe away this anger he had. It had been a week since Helen jumped into the icy waters of the Susquehanna to save Lydia, that fateful February day. She took a deep breath and sighed. In that week her life seemed to change forever. She and the little girl seemed to be known all over the country. The thing that was not comfortable, for Helen, was the fact that people recognized her every place she went, even on campus. She really did not like the attention, especially from the young men on campus. She was asked out a couple of times, but politely declined. 3 news stations interviewed her. They asked her many times what it felt like to be a hero. Those interviews were done with only Helen, since Lydia was still hospitalized. However, that day it had changed. Lydia had been released from the hospital that morning and they had done their first of 7 interviews. For those that knew her best, they knew that Helen was anything but comfortable in front of a camera. She hated crowds. She liked to stay on the outside of things. She avoided drawing attention to herself. It was just who she was. A doctor had diagnosed her with anxiety issues when she was still a kid. Her mother did not have any qualms telling people that, when it became evident that Helen did not want to socialize. "Please let this go by fast," she whispered a plea to God. "Did you say something?" her mother asked from across the room. "I was just talking to God," Helen said softly. Helen's mother came up behind her chair and put her arms around her shoulders. Bending over, she planted a kiss on the top of her head. "This too shall pass, my dear," she said with a smile. "Now then, there is something we need to talk about," her mother said. Elena Day sat watching the afternoon news. She could not help but smile as the interview started with little Lydia. The little girl looked so adorable in the purple overalls her mom had put on her. She could not help but giggle a bit when she saw Helen sitting next to the girl. Poor Helen, everyone knew she was so out of place doing these interviews. It just hit Elena a little different than it did Esther, Helen's mother. Elena could see the humor in it. Not in a cruel way, but in a way that made her remember the conversation she had had with Helen about a year ago. She allowed herself to think back to that time. "Hi, Helen, how are you?" Elena observed the 20-year-old jump. "Mrs. Day, you about gave me heart failure. I did not even hear you come up behind me," Helen exclaimed softly. "My son says the same thing. I am light on my feet. It may be that he gets his dance ability from me." The older woman smiled as she did a dance step. Helen laughed. "I hope he does not make it a habit of sneaking up on people too." Elena cocked her head to the side. She observed the young woman in front of her. She was always drawn to Helen. However, there was always something that made her think the young lady really did not care to be around a great deal of people. She did not go out with the other kids when she was a teen, she did not seem inclined to make friends now to go out with, and she seemed like it almost hurt to talk now. Helen knew she was being observed. She could not help it, but she started to fidget under Mrs. Day's scrutiny. Elena cleared her throat and ventured, "You do not enjoy a great deal of contact with people, do you, Helen?" "Now before you answer, I am not trying to make it seem bad. I just want you to know I understand." Helen looked down. She always hated it when her mom would make the same observation. She cleared her throat. She was going to answer, but the words just seemed to stick. "It is okay, Helen. I just want to say one thing to you. I just feel like God is telling me I need to say this to you. Sometimes He calls us out of our comfort zones. If He does this to you, please, be obedient. He loves you, and He will protect you at that time," Elena said to the younger woman. Elena remembered the tears in the young lady's eyes. She did not say anything. She just nodded and smiled before she walked to her calling mother. Hearing Helen's voice on the TV brought her back to the present. She started to make her supper as the interview was coming to an end. She was just getting ready to put the chicken in the oven when Lydia's mom was saying that they did not have good insurance. The bill for the hospital was over $200,000. She vowed to pay every penny back. She was just so grateful to the doctors and hospital staff for saving her daughter's life. Elena's mind began to form a plan. She was not sure if it would work, but was willing to give it a shot. She put the chicken in the oven and called Logan. "You want me to what?" Logan tried not to yell, but he just could not help it. His mother was out of her mind. "Now hear me out, son." Elena tried to calm him. This little girl did not have a good healthcare plan. Her parents can't afford to pay this bill. A person like you doing a benefit would be a great way to raise money. "I understand the benefit part, Mom. I do not understand the part in which you want me to teach Helen to dance," he hissed through clenched teeth. "It would be a great way to draw attention to the benefit. The news can do updates on how it is going with the lessons. We can sell tickets to a dinner that ends with some type of ballroom dance featuring you and Helen. You have to admit, it would draw a crowd. We may be able to pay off the entire bill for Lydia's family. If there is any money left, we can even set up a fund at the hospital to be used for those that can't pay their bills." Logan ran his fingers through his hair. He knew he had no reason to say no. He had nothing on his schedule for the next 2 months. He remembered the phone conversation a week ago about this time and the question he asked himself when he hung up. He could do this. He had the time to do this. He did want to help this child's family. He just did not want to be that close to Helen. He had a choice to make. Taking a deep breath, he decided to make the right choice. I'll do it if she will. Closing his eyes, he resigned himself to dealing with the anger and helping this child's family. What a day! Helen sat at her computer desk and tried to do her homework. All she could think about was what her mother had asked her to do earlier. Learn to dance. Not just learn to dance. Do it in front of cameras. She just could not imagine what Mrs. Day was thinking bringing this up to her mom. When asked to do this, Helen went to her number one answer. Let me pray about it. She sniffed, letting a tear run down her cheek. She watched it drip onto her desktop. She had prayed about it. She knew what God wanted her to do. She just had such a hard time imagining that God was going to ask her to do this. He knew her so well. He knew she had come to a point of depending on his arms only for strength and comfort. He knew this was going to be so uncomfortable for her. Why was he asking this of her now? Helen knew she would not be able to sleep until she told her mother the answer. Who was she kidding? She was not even sure that would help her sleep. Going to her bed, she propped pillows in a circle. As she had done for a long time, she snuggled into those pillows and pretended they were the physical arms of God. She lay there and cried for a few minutes. She lay there in hopes God would change his answer. After some time had passed and with a weary spirit, Helen went to her mother's room and told her she would do the benefit. Helen returned to her room and went back to her pillows and talked to Jesus. She told him how scared she was of this. She asked him to forgive her for her lack of faith. She laid it all in her Savior's hands, and then, she slept.